Hey everyone, we have a lot to talk about today because the weather pattern over the next couple of weeks is going to be pretty active and there are a lot of changes coming. If you thought the last storm was wild, just wait. Things are about to get even more interesting. We're looking at another round of winter weather, the potential for severe storms in parts of the country, and even more cold air surging in as we move into February. It's going to be a very busy time in the weather world, so let's break it all down and talk about what you need to know. First off, let's take a look at what's been happening recently. We just wrapped up dealing with that historic winter storm that brought snowfall to places that almost never see snow. This was truly a once-in-a-lifetime event for some areas, and if you were in the South and experienced snow in places like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, or even parts of Florida, you know exactly how rare this was. Some areas picked up half a foot or more of snow, which shattered records going back decades. In fact, in some spots, it was the most snow ever recorded in a single day. One of the most impressive records came from Milton, Florida, where they saw nearly 10 inches of snow. To put that in perspective, the previous record was just 4 inches set way back in 1954, so this was something truly extraordinary. A lot of cities in the Deep South also saw their daily snowfall records get completely smashed, which just goes to show how rare and powerful this storm was. And if you were in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, you got anywhere from 8 to 10 inches of snow, which is almost unheard of for that area. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Now, even though that storm is over, its impacts are still lingering. The snow is starting to melt, but some areas are holding on to it a little longer, especially in Georgia, South Carolina, and eastern North Carolina. That's because temperatures have stayed pretty chilly. And we've had a lot of cloud cover preventing the sun from helping speed up the melting process. But in most places, the snow will likely be gone within the next day or so as temperatures begin to moderate. One of the most interesting things to come out of the storm was the satellite imagery, which showed just how much snow covered the ground all the way from Texas to the Carolinas and even into Florida. It's crazy to see that some areas in the Deep South have more snow on the ground than parts of the Midwest right now. That's how unusual this pattern has been. Now, let's shift gears and talk about what's coming next because things are far from quieting down. The weather pattern is about to shift again, and we have multiple systems to track as we head into the last few days of January and into early February. Over the next several days, the jet stream is going to undergo some pretty big changes, and that's going to have a major impact on the weather across the country. Right now, the jet stream is pretty active with strong upper-level winds stretching from Texas all the way up into the Northeast. This is something to keep in mind if you're flying, especially if you're traveling between the Midwest and the East Coast, because this kind of setup usually results in a lot of turbulence. However, as we get closer to the weekend, the jet stream is going to flatten out a little bit, which means we'll see a more zonal flow. That's just a fancy way of saying that the winds will be moving mostly west to east instead of dipping up and down. When that happens, it usually brings more stable and mild conditions across much of the country. That being said, we do have a couple things to watch. One of them is a developing disturbance on the west coast that's going to bring some rain and mountain snow to California. Normally, that wouldn't be a huge deal, but with the wildfire situation in Southern California, this is something we need to pay attention to. Just yesterday, a wildfire erupted north of Los Angeles near Santa Clarita, and it quickly exploded in size from just a few hundred acres to nearly 10,000 acres in a matter of hours. There have already been evacuation orders issued, and unfortunately, there are reports of structures being damaged. The winds aren't quite as strong as they were a couple of weeks ago when we had hurricane-force gusts, but they're still strong enough to spread the fire rapidly. The good news is that this storm system coming in this weekend should bring some much-needed rain to help firefighters get things under control. However, there is also a small risk that thunderstorms could spark new fires, so it's something we'll need to keep monitoring. Looking ahead to next week, things start to get even more interesting. By the middle of the week, we'll be watching a disturbance moving out of the Rockies and into the southern plains. This system has the potential to be our next big winter storm, and it could also bring some severe weather depending on how it evolves. Right now, the models are showing that this storm could take a similar track to the one we just saw, which means we could be looking at another round of heavy snow, ice, and possibly severe thunderstorms in the Deep South. Of course, we're still several days away from this happening, so things could change, but it's something to be aware of. Beyond that, as we head into February, there are signs that we could see another major push of Arctic air. The long-range models are hinting at the potential for a significant cold outbreak sometime in early February, possibly around the 2nd or 3rd. It's too early to say exactly how strong this cold snap will be or how far south it will reach, but given the pattern we've been in, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another round of unusually cold temperatures making their way down into the central and eastern U.S. That could also set the stage for another winter storm, so we'll be watching that closely. In the meantime, over the next 48 hours, temperatures will remain below average for much of the country, especially east of the Rockies. But as we get into the weekend, there will be a slight warming trend, with temperatures returning closer to normal in many areas. However, that will be short-lived because by the middle of next week, another cold front will bring a fresh batch of chilly air to the northeast. After that, we could see another warm-up before that potential Arctic blast arrives in early February. Right now, we're seeing the departure of the Arctic air that had a firm grip on much of the eastern half of the country. If you look at the temperature maps, you'll notice that the deep blues, the coldest air, are retreating northward into eastern Canada and the northeast. This was all connected to a stretching of the tropospheric polar vortex, which allowed that brutally cold air to surge southward last week. Now, as that cold air lifts back north, we're seeing a ridge of high pressure building in behind it. So that's pretty typical after an intense cold spell. High pressure often follows, bringing some temporary warmth and stability. But here's the thing, just because the extreme cold is leaving doesn't mean winter is over. Far from it. We're still going to have a few shots of colder air in the coming weeks, and the weather pattern looks to become increasingly active once again. So while temperatures in the central and eastern U.S. will moderate through the rest of January, we're still keeping an eye on the potential for another round of Arctic air and winter storms as we head into early February. Let's take a look at the precipitation trends for the rest of this week and into the weekend. One of the big stories right now is the lake effect snow across the Great Lakes. Even as the main Arctic blast moves out, we still have plenty of cold air interacting with the warmer lake waters, generating those classic lake effect snow bands. If you're in areas near Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, or Lake Ontario, you're going to be dealing with heavy snow for at least another day or two. These lake effect snow events can be incredibly localized, but also very intense. Some areas could see an additional 8 to 12 inches of snow, particularly in western New York near Watertown and downwind of the other Great Lakes. Travel could be difficult at times, especially in the strongest snow bands where visibility can drop to near zero. If you're in these regions, be prepared for slick roads and possible travel delays. Now let's shift our focus out west because there's something really interesting developing there. We have a cutoff low pressure system spinning off the coast of Southern California, and this could actually bring some much needed moisture to the region. If you've been keeping up with the drought situation, you know that Southern California and parts of the Southwest have been dealing with severe to extreme drought conditions, and unfortunately that's contributed to an increasing wildfire risk. In fact, just earlier today, a major wildfire broke out east of San Diego. That's why this incoming moisture is such a big deal. By Saturday night, we'll start to see some rain developing in the foothills of California, especially in Southern California. Higher elevations in the Sierra Nevada will get some snow, while lower elevations will see rain. This isn't going to be a huge storm. Nothing too crazy. But it will be enough to dampen the ground, which will help with the wildfire concerns. Any moisture is beneficial at this point, and we could even see some isolated spots picking up over an inch of rain. This pattern will continue into early February, with additional chances for precipitation. Looking ahead to next week, things start to get even more interesting across the lower 48. The European model is showing another clipper system moving through the upper Great Lakes and Ontario early in the week. These fast-moving systems don't usually bring huge amounts of snow, but they can drop a quick few inches and bring some gusty winds. But what really has my attention is what's happening by midweek. We're watching a developing system in the southern plains that could bring a mix of rain and snow. Right now, models are showing snow developing in parts of Colorado and New Mexico while rain spreads into Texas and Oklahoma. By Thursday, we could even be looking at some thunderstorm activity, especially in areas from Arkansas southward into Louisiana and East Texas. If instability builds, we may need to watch for some strong to severe storms as well. Then, as we move into next weekend, things really ramp up. Both the European and GFS models are hinting at the potential for a significant winter storm developing in the Midwest and Great Lakes region. The exact track and intensity are still uncertain, but if you live in cities like Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay, this could be the storm that finally brings some significant snowfall your way. And at the same time, the southern side of this system could bring heavy rain and even severe weather to parts of the South. Beyond that, we're seeing another pattern shift as we head into early February. This time, we're looking at high pressure building over the south and southeast, which will keep those areas milder while the colder air remains locked into the northern plains, the northwest, and parts of southwest Canada. This could lead to another stormy period with the potential for another significant system between February 1st and 8th. Both the European and GFS models are showing a parade of storms moving in from the Pacific, tracking across the Rockies, and then spreading into the northern U.S. The exact details will change as we get closer, but if you live in the northern plains, Midwest, or Great Lakes, be prepared for the potential of more snow. Meanwhile, the South will need to watch for more rain and possibly severe weather. So, to sum everything up, yes, things are quieter right now compared to last week's historic winter storm, but that's not going to last long. We're heading into another very active period as we close out January and move into February. More winter storms, more cold air, and even the potential for severe weather all on the table. That's why it's so important to stay updated, and I'll be here to break it all down for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.